At the beginning of this lesson, we worked on adding decimals and we worked on subtracting decimals, and we talked about lining up our decimals and then using our integer rules with the negatives. Now we're going to do some problem solving, and so we're going to be looking at the words in the word problems to see what tells us should we add or subtract, and then using those lining up our decimals to add or subtract and find the answer. So number 1 says Anna swims the length of the pool in 38 and 45 seconds, and then swims the length of the pool again in 42 and 38 seconds. What is her total time for the two lengths of the pool? And there's a little think bubble here. What words in the problem tell me to add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Underline these words. When we're talking about total time for two lengths, we're talking about adding. So we want, a lot of times total will tell us to add. Not always, but most of the time we can count that as an adding word. And so I've got 38 and 45 hundredths plus 42 and 38 hundredths. Notice that I lined up my decimals, and now I'm just going to do my addition to find my answer. 5 plus 8 is 13. Carry my 1. 1 plus 4 plus 3 is 8. Bring that decimal point down. 8 plus 2 is 10, carry my 1. 1 plus 3 plus 4 is 80. And so my answer here, what is her total time for the two lengths, is 80 and 83 hundredths. Whenever we're doing word problems, we always want to label our answer. And so what is her total time? 80 and 83 hundredths. There it is for us. Seconds. We were adding seconds and seconds. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask myself on a word problem, does my answer make sense? Does it seem reasonable that she would swim 2 laps in a pool in a little over a minute? Seems reasonable. If I estimate 38 and 45 hundredths is really close to 38, 42 and 38 hundredths is really close to 42, and when I add them I get 80, that's very close to 80 and 83 hundredths seconds, so my answer seems reasonable and makes sense for this word problem. And I also have my label. Number 2 says Poe has 2 gerbils, Yip and Yap. Yip weighs 3 and 62 hundredths ounces, and Yap weighs 2 and 79 hundredths ounces. How much heavier is Yip than Yap? So, how much heavier? That actually means that we're going to subtract. And we just have to figure out Yip weighs more, so 32 and 62, or 3 and 62 hundredths minus 2 and 79 hundredths. 2 minus 9 I can't do, so I'm going to borrow. 12 minus 9 is 3. 5 minus 7 I can't do, so I'm going to borrow. 15 minus 7 is 8. Bring down my decimal point. 2 minus 2 is 0. And so this one, my answer, how much heavier, is 83 hundredths, and when I'm looking for a label, I'm going to label it as ounces. So I've got 83 hundredths ounces more. When we talk about does my answer make sense or seem reasonable, it seems reasonable that 2 gerbils would weigh very similar weights, so that seems reasonable. When I go to estimate my answer, this is about 4 minus about 3, which is about 1. 83 hundredths of an ounce is very close to 1, and so my estimate seems reasonable and makes my answer make more sense and makes me feel good about my problem solving. So when we problem solve with adding and subtracting decimals, we want to make sure that we're lining up our decimals. We want to make sure that we label our answer when we get it, and then we always want to use our estimating skills, even if it's just mental math in our head, to make sure that our answer makes sense and seems reasonable.